Welcome into The Rundown, a daily podcast where we at CBN News bring you inside information about the stories we're working on. Today is Wednesday, April 21st, and I'm Caitlin Burke. Companies used to avoid politics like the plague. Now they're openly pushing a political agenda, and the consequences for Christians could be serious. Senior international correspondent Dale Hurd says it's all a part of corporate America's efforts to be woke. He joins me now. Dale, first off, let's define what woke means.
Well, the Urban Dictionary says it's being aware of social injustice. But it implies more than that. It implies being on board with the idea that there's not only social injustice, which I think we would all agree to, but that it's systemic and that it requires some of the solutions that some of us wouldn't agree with, like defunding the police and so forth.
I wasn't expecting the term woke to be attached to corporate America, but in your recent story, you share some examples of how we've seen kind of woke culture show up there. Can you talk about those?
Well, yeah, I mean, folks watching television may have been shocked to see some of these commercials, and maybe, some are only on YouTube, but I mean, you got Pantene. Instead of pitching shampoo, they're showing lesbian parents helping a biological boy become a girl. Ben and Jerry's is, flashing defund the police on the screen and things like this. It's very radical. It is a very different America, let's put it that way.
Does it seem like cancel culture has anything to do with this shift into politics? Kind of a get on board or get shunned by the masses mentality?
That's a good question. I think that corporations, maybe I'm not answering your question directly, but I think they're trying to ride a wave. Yeah. I don't think financial opportunity in this as much as burnishing their reputations and trying to make themselves look like a good citizen.
Are we seeing any pushback as corporations kind of make this shift?
Well, really, the only people who can push back are politicians, and the Republicans have kind of gone to war with corporations just in the past week after, the Major League Baseball pulled the All-Star game out of Georgia because of Georgia's election integrity law. McConnell warned them, stay out of politics, and the Georgia state legislature, threatened to yank the, some of the benefits for Delta Airlines, which is based in Georgia. And so we're seeing things like that. And it's been interesting that it has had an impact, because when corporations issued a statement later, they tried to get every corporation they could to sign this statement against election integrity laws. Delta and Coke were not on the list. So Coca-Cola also being in Georgia and has also been threatened with a boycott. So right now it's the GOP versus corporations, in my view.
Could riding this wave and taking this sort of stand be bad for business, or does it seem to be pretty popular?
They don't seem to think it will be, but in my view, the boardroom is disconnected from Main Street in a pretty major way. I mean, these are people live different lives. In a way, it's like Hollywood. They're not really that connected to small town America. And so I think it depends on the product. Of course, I'm not on board with these woke stands, but if you're looking just at, is it going to hurt your business? Probably not if you're Nike. In fact, I think Nike has said it helped their business, or Ben and Jerry's. But if you're Walmart, if you're, a company that deals more, that, seems to be associated more with middle America and small town America, I think it's a dumb move to go woke.
So in your story, you talk about how this could ultimately affect the church. Can you talk about why that is?
Yeah, well, I interviewed Rod Dreher, who, everyone should follow, frankly. He's on the website, The American Conservative, but he's written the book, Live Not by Lies, a handbook for Christian dissidents, where he interviews people who came from behind the Iron Curtain and are saying, look, that's replaying here in America. America's headed for totalitarianism. And Dreher believes that this is going to morph into a social credit system like China has, and that conservatives could be cut out and just like in the book of Revelation, not be allowed to buy or sell. Now, I will say the other expert, Stephen Sokup, who was looking at it more from a business standpoint, he believes that the market forces will end this, that it's a fad, and that companies are going to realize that they should just stay out of politics. But Dreher believes that corporate America will eventually come for the church, sort of teamed up with Silicon Valley, which has already talked about a social credit system, which really seems hard to believe until you realize if you think that these views are good, these woke views are a virtue, then you want everyone to hold them. And if people don't hold them, like a lot of conservatives, well, they're bad people. And there's pressure on financial services companies like PayPal and MasterCard to not have conservative customers, to ban them. And so then it really does start to look, frankly, like the book of Revelation and the mark of the beast.
So you mentioned that conservative lawmakers are starting to kind of stand up to these corporations. Is there anything else that the rest of us can do to get corporations to back down?
Well, I would say generally, not only on this, but on a lot of issues, that some of the best people in America, who have raised fine children and, done great in their careers, and they're just, they're salt of the earth people, they've been minding their own business, and they need to stop doing that because the left does not mind its own business. It's gone into the corporate boardroom. It's threatened companies with pressure campaigns, and conservatives need to start going to shareholder meetings. They need to start letting companies know that this is not acceptable and that companies do need to stay out of politics.
All right. Well, Dale, anything else that you learned as you were pursuing this story, talking to some experts that really stood out to you that we haven't covered yet?
Well, I will say that it's hard to find a large corporation that hasn't gone on board with this. You only find small privately held companies and the usual suspects like Chick-fil-A or Hobby Lobby. Almost all of the major corporations have gone over to this woke thing. And I'll also say that it reminded me of Hollywood. Okay, there are Christians in Hollywood, but there aren't enough Christians in Hollywood. And there are Christians in corporate America and in the boardroom, but obviously there aren't enough Christians in corporate America.
So true. Well, guys, you can see Dale's story on our website, cbnnews.com. It also airs on the 700 Club today, so be sure to check it out. Dale, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure, Caitlin. Thank you.
CBN News provides a faith-based perspective on the most important stories of the day. But it takes time, hard work, and resources. Will you help us continue to be a voice for truth in the media? Visit cbnnews.com/give now. And thanks for listening. Some other headlines we're following today. The verdict is in the Derek Chauvin case. Guilty on all 3 counts. George Floyd's family says the outcome is an answer to prayer and a pivotal moment for racial justice in America. The jury of 4 blacks, 6 whites, and 2 mixed-race Americans deliberated for just 10.5 hours. The sentencing for Derek Chauvin expected in about 8 weeks, the most serious charge carrying a maximum sentence of 40 years behind bars. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ruled out forming a new government. He wants to avoid a coalition that would rely on the Islamist Ra'am Party. Instead, Netanyahu is angling for a direct route to the prime minister's post, bypassing parliament and considering calling for a one-time snap election. In that scenario, whoever gets more than 40% of the vote would win. Netanyahu's critics say Israel does not need another election. That's all for now, but if you're enjoying the CBN News Daily Rundown, be sure to check out the CBN News app. As certain voices are censored and free speech platforms are shut down, downloading it will ensure you keep receiving news from a Christian perspective. I'll meet you back here tomorrow with more of the top stories and behind-the-scenes insight into how we're covering them.